The dust settled around her boots as she stepped off the stagecoach, and Caleb Norris knew in that instant his life would never be the same again. He had been standing outside the general store in Paso Robles, California, minding his own business on that sweltering afternoon in July of 1873, when the coach rolled in. Most days were unremarkable in this small town, nestled in the San Luis Obispo County hills. Cowboys came and went. Travelers passed through on their way to San Francisco or Los Angeles. Nothing ever truly changed. But when that woman emerged from the dusty coach, her dark hair catching the sunlight like polished mahogany, something shifted deep in Caleb's chest. She wore a simple traveling dress, brown and practical, but the way she carried herself spoke of determination and grace. Her face was dust-streaked from the journey, yet her eyes remained bright and clear as they swept across the unfamiliar town. Those eyes were the color of deep amber, warm and searching, and when they briefly met his across the dirt street, Caleb felt his breath catch. He was 24 years old and had spent his entire life working the ranch his father had built from nothing. He understood horses and cattle, the language of the land and the rhythm of hard work. Women, though, remained a mystery he had never quite solved. The few young ladies in Paso Robles had never stirred anything in him beyond polite friendship. But this stranger, standing alone with a single worn carpetbag at her feet, made his heart race in a way he had only read about in the dime novels he secretly kept under his bunk. Caleb found his feet moving before his mind caught up with his intentions. He crossed the street, weaving between a wagon and a pair of horses tied to the hitching post. As he approached, he could see her more clearly. She was perhaps 22 or 23, with delicate features that held both vulnerability and strength. A few wisps of hair had escaped from the pins holding her careful bun, framing her face in soft waves. "Pardon me, miss," he said, removing his hat in a gesture his mother had drilled into him since childhood. "You look like you might need some direction. I am Caleb Norris. My family owns the Circle and Ranch just outside town. Can I help you find your way?" She turned those amber eyes fully on him, and he saw wariness there mixed with something else. Hope, perhaps, or maybe just exhaustion from a long journey. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he expected, with a slight tremor that suggested she was holding herself together through sheer willpower. "I appreciate your kindness, sir. My name is Victoria Owens. I have come from Missouri to meet my cousin, Margaret Sullivan. She wrote to me some months ago, inviting me to stay with her family." "Do you know of them?" Caleb's heart sank. He knew the Sullivans, and what he knew was not good news for this hopeful woman standing before him. Margaret Sullivan and her husband Thomas had been good people, trying to make a go of farming on the eastern edge of the valley. But fever had swept through their homestead that spring, taking both of them within days of each other. Their 3 children had been sent back east to live with Thomas's brother. "Miss Owens," he began carefully, searching for gentle words, "I am afraid I have difficult news. The Sullivans passed away 3 months back. Fever took them both. I am truly sorry." The color drained from Victoria's face. She swayed slightly, and Caleb instinctively reached out to steady her, his hand grasping her elbow. Even through the fabric of her dress he could feel her trembling. "That cannot be," she whispered. "I received her letter only in April. She said they were doing well, that there was work here for me, a fresh start. I sold everything I had to afford the journey, I thought." Her voice trailed off, and Caleb watched as she struggled to maintain her composure. He could see her throat working as she swallowed hard, fighting back tears. The vulnerability in that moment struck him deeply. Here was a woman who had risked everything on the promise of family and a new beginning, only to find herself stranded and alone in a strange town. "Come with me," he said gently. "Let us get you out of this heat. The boarding house has a dining room where we can sit, and you can have some water while we figure out what to do." Victoria looked up at him, those amber eyes searching his face as if trying to determine whether she could trust him. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she gave a small nod. Caleb picked up her carpetbag, noting how light it was, suggesting she truly had sold nearly everything to come west, and gestured toward the boarding house at the end of the street. As they walked, Caleb was acutely aware of the curious glances from townspeople. Paso Robles was small enough that everyone knew everyone else's business, and a stranger being escorted by one of the Norris boys would fuel gossip for weeks. But Caleb found he did not care. Something about Victoria Owens called to something deep within him, and he knew with absolute certainty that he could not simply abandon her to figure out her troubles alone. The boarding house was run by Martha Henderson, a widow in her 50s who had a reputation for being both practical and kind. When Caleb explained the situation in hushed tones while Victoria waited by the door, Martha's expression softened with sympathy. "Poor dear," Martha said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Bring her to the back parlor. I will get some cold tea and something to eat. She looks ready to collapse." The parlor was blessedly cool, shaded by a large oak tree outside the window. Caleb guided Victoria to a cushioned chair and waited until she was seated before taking a seat himself on the nearby settee. Now that they were in better light, away from the harsh glare of the street, he could see the fine lines of worry around her eyes, the pallor beneath the dust on her cheeks. "Tell me," he said quietly, "do you have other family? Anyone who could send you funds to return home?" Victoria's laugh was bitter and soft. "If I had family I could rely on, I would not have come all this way to stay with a cousin I had never even met. My parents died when I was 15. Cholera. I was raised by my aunt after that, but she passed 2 years ago. Margaret was my only living relative, and we had only exchanged a handful of letters. She painted such a picture of California, of opportunity and sunshine. I was working in a dress shop, barely making enough to keep a room. When she invited me to come west, it seemed like Providence." Caleb listened, his heart aching for her. He understood loss, having buried his own mother 3 years prior to consumption, but he had his father and his younger brother Matthew. He had the ranch and the land, a purpose and a place. Victoria had gambled everything on a promise and arrived to find it broken before she could even grasp it. Martha arrived with a tray laden with tea, cold chicken, fresh bread, and peach preserves. "You eat up, dear," she said to Victoria with motherly authority. "Everything looks better on a full stomach." As Victoria ate, Caleb watched her carefully, noting the precise way she handled her fork, the straightness of her posture even in exhaustion. She had been raised with manners and care, despite her recent hardships. She was educated too, he could tell by the way she spoke. This was not a woman accustomed to being without resources or direction. "I will need to find work immediately," Victoria said after she had finished eating and had regained some color in her cheeks. "Is there a dress shop in town, or perhaps a school that needs a teacher? I can sew well, and I have decent handwriting and arithmetic." Caleb considered this. Paso Robles had a school teacher already, old Miss Patterson, who had been teaching the local children for 20 years and showed no signs of retiring. There was no dress shop, as most women made their own clothes or ordered from catalogs. The few businesses in town were the general store, the blacksmith, the saloon, the livery, and the land office. None of them were likely to hire a genteel young woman from Missouri. "The options are limited," he admitted, "but let me talk to some people." In the meantime, I will pay for a room here for you for the week. That will give us time to sort things out properly." "I cannot accept charity," Victoria said firmly, though her eyes showed her desperation. "I will not be a burden to anyone." "It is not charity," Caleb replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "It is simple human decency. You came here in good faith, and circumstances beyond your control have put you in a difficult position. Allow the people of this town to show you the hospitality of the West." Something in his tone or his expression must have reached her, because Victoria's resistance crumbled slightly. "I will accept for 1 week," she said quietly, "but I must find employment by then. I will not impose beyond that." Caleb nodded, respecting her pride even as he wondered what options truly existed for her. As he left the boarding house and walked back toward where he had tied his horse, his mind raced with possibilities. The truth was, Paso Robles did not have many opportunities for a woman alone. Most women here were wives and mothers, their work centered on family and home. A single woman without family was an anomaly, and not one that the small town was well equipped to accommodate. As he rode back to the Circle and Ranch, the evening sun painting the hills in shades of gold and amber that reminded him of Victoria's eyes, an idea began to form. It was bold, perhaps even foolish, but it felt right in a way he could not fully explain. He would need to talk to his father first, and probably face some skepticism from his brother, but Caleb was not a man who ignored his instincts. And every instinct he possessed told him that Victoria Owens had walked into his life for a reason. The Circle and Ranch sprawled across 2,000 acres of prime California grassland, with the Salinas River running through the eastern boundary. Caleb's father, Charles Norris, had arrived in California in 1849 during the gold rush. But unlike most men who had chased dreams of instant wealth, Charles had recognized that the real fortune lay in the land itself. He had staked his claim, built his herd, and created something lasting. The main house was a sturdy structure of wood and stone, built to withstand the hot summers and mild winters of the region. As Caleb rode up the dusty path toward home, he could see smoke rising from the chimney, meaning their cook, Rosa, was preparing supper. His younger brother Matthew was working with one of the horses in the corral, and his father sat on the porch, reviewing what looked like account books. Charles Norris was 52 years old, with gray threading through his dark hair and lines carved into his weathered face by years of sun and wind. He was a fair man but exacting, expecting his sons to pull their weight and maintain the standards he had set. When Caleb dismounted and climbed the porch steps, his father looked up with raised eyebrows. "You were supposed to pick up supplies in town," Charles said mildly, "but I do not see any packages." "I got sidetracked," Caleb admitted, taking the chair beside his father. "Something happened that I need to discuss with you." Over the next 20 minutes, Caleb explained the situation, starting with Victoria's arrival and ending with her current predicament at the boarding house. His father listened without interruption, his expression giving nothing away until Caleb had finished. "So let me understand," Charles said slowly. "You want to offer this woman, this complete stranger, employment here at the ranch. Doing what exactly?" "We have needed help with the house since Mother passed," Caleb said carefully. "Rosa manages the cooking well enough, but the rest of the place has gotten run down. The mending piles up. The garden is overgrown. There are 100 tasks that a capable woman could handle, and Miss Owens strikes me as very capable." Charles studied his son with the shrewd gaze that missed little. "And this has nothing to do with the fact that she is a young woman and you are a young man." Caleb felt heat rise to his face but held his father's gaze. "I will not lie and say I do not find her compelling, But my primary concern is that she is stranded here through no fault of her own, and we have the means to help her. Is that not what Mother would have wanted? To extend kindness to someone in need. At the mention of his late wife, something softened in Charles's expression. Mary Norris had indeed been a woman of great compassion, always the first to help a neighbor or welcome a stranger. Your mother would have already had her moved into the guest room and been planning meals to fatten her up, he admitted with a slight smile. But we must be practical, Caleb. A young, unmarried woman living on a ranch with 3 men will cause talk. This town may be small, but people have long memories and sharp tongues. Then we will be careful to maintain propriety, Caleb argued. Rosa is here as a chaperone of sorts. Miss Owens would have her own room with a proper door that locks. We would treat her with the utmost respect, as an employee and nothing more. As an employee and nothing more, Charles repeated, his tone making it clear he had his doubts about the nothing more part. And if she agrees to this arrangement, what are you offering in terms of wages? Caleb had thought about this on the ride home. $20 a month plus room and board. That is fair for the work involved, and it will allow her to save toward whatever future she chooses. Charles was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the arm of his chair. Finally, he sighed. I will agree to a trial period of 3 months. If the arrangement works and her reputation remains intact, we can discuss making it more permanent. But Caleb, he fixed his son with a stern look, I am trusting you to behave honorably. That young woman has already suffered enough disappointment. Do not add to her troubles. I give you my word, Caleb said solemnly, and he meant it. Whatever he felt when he looked at Victoria Owens, whatever strange pull existed between them, he would not take advantage of her vulnerable position. She deserved respect and safety, and he would ensure she had both. The next morning, Caleb rode back into Paso Robles with his father's blessing and a proper job offer for Victoria. He found her in the boarding house dining room, wearing the same brown traveling dress but looking more rested than she had the previous day. When she saw him enter, something flickered across her face. Relief, perhaps, or maybe just cautious hope. Miss Owens, he said, approaching her table. Might I have a word with you in private? Martha Henderson gestured them toward the parlor, giving Caleb a knowing look that he chose to ignore. Once they were seated, he laid out his proposal clearly and carefully, watching Victoria's face for her reaction. You are offering me employment at your family's ranch, she said slowly when he had finished. Living on the property, performing household duties. Yes, Caleb confirmed. I know it is not what you planned when you came west, but it is honest work with fair pay. My father has agreed to a 3-month trial. After that, if the arrangement suits everyone, we could make it permanent, or you would have saved enough money to make other plans. Victoria was quiet, her hands folded carefully in her lap. Caleb could see her mind working through the implications, weighing her limited options. When she finally looked up at him, those amber eyes were clear and direct. I will be frank with you, Mr. Norris. I find myself in desperate circumstances. Your offer is generous, more generous than I had any right to expect from a stranger. But I must know that I will be safe. I am aware of how vulnerable my position is, alone and without resources. I need your assurance that I will be treated with respect and that my reputation will be protected. The directness of her speech, the courage it took to voice her concern so plainly, only deepened Caleb's respect for her. You have my word and my father's word that you will be treated as we would want our own mother or sister to be treated. Rosa, our cook, lives on the property. She is a formidable woman who will serve as chaperone and friend. You will have privacy and safety. This I promise you. Victoria searched his face for a long moment, and Caleb held himself still under her scrutiny, letting her see whatever she needed to see. Finally, she nodded. "Then I accept your offer, Mr. Norris. When would you like me to begin?" "Tomorrow," Caleb said, feeling relief and something warmer wash through him. "I will come for you after breakfast. Bring whatever belongings you have. The ranch will be your home now." As Caleb rode back to the circle that afternoon, he could not shake the feeling that he had just set something momentous in motion. He had told his father and Victoria that this was simply about providing employment to someone in need, and that was true. But there was more to it, something he was not ready to name even to himself. When Victoria had looked at him with those amber eyes, when their hands had briefly touched as he helped her from the stagecoach, he had felt a connection that defied explanation. His father had spoken of destiny once, after his mother had died. Charles had told his sons about the day he first met Mary, how he had known within minutes that she would be his wife. Caleb had been young then, thinking it was just the romantic notions of a grieving widower. But now, having met Victoria, he wondered if perhaps his father had simply been describing something real, something rare but genuine. The next morning dawned clear and warm, promising another hot July day. Caleb took extra care with his appearance, washing thoroughly and putting on his newer shirt, the blue one that his mother had made for him before she died. Matthew noticed and made a teasing comment that Caleb ignored, focusing instead on the nervous energy running through him. When he arrived at the boarding house, Victoria was waiting on the porch, her carpetbag at her feet and a bonnet shading her face. She wore the same brown dress, and Caleb realized with a pang that it was probably the only dress she owned. His mother's clothes were still packed away in the trunk in the attic. Perhaps some of them could be altered for Victoria. It would be practical, he told himself, not personal. "Good morning, Miss Owens," he said, dismounting and tying his horse to the post. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I can be," she replied with a small smile that did not quite reach her eyes. He could see the anxiety there, the fear of the unknown she was trying to mask with courage. Caleb had brought the wagon rather than just his horse, thinking it more appropriate for transporting Victoria and her belongings. He helped her up onto the seat, very aware of his hand at her waist, the warmth of her even through layers of fabric. Once she was settled, he placed her bag in the back and climbed up beside her. The ride out to the circle end took about 40 minutes, following the main road east from town, before turning onto the private track that led to the ranch. Caleb used the time to tell Victoria about the property, the work they did, and the people she would be living with. "Rosa has been with us for 5 years, he explained as the wagon bounced along the rutted road. "She came from a pueblo near Santa Barbara. Her husband died, and she needed work. My mother hired her initially just for cooking, but she has become part of the family. She can be gruff, but her heart is good." "And your brother?" Victoria asked. "Matthew, you said. He is 21, full of energy and opinions," Caleb said with affection. "He works harder than anyone I know, trying to prove himself to our father. He is a good man, just young." "And you?" Victoria asked, then seemed to catch herself. "Forgive me, that was forward." "No, it is fine," Caleb said, glancing at her. "I am 24. I have lived my whole life on this ranch. It is all I really know, but I love it. The land, the work, the rhythm of the seasons. Some men dream of cities and adventure, but this is enough for me." Victoria was quiet for a moment, and when Caleb looked over, he found her gazing out at the rolling hills, dotted with oak trees and golden grasses. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "So different from Missouri. Everything there is green and close. Here the land seems to go on forever." "Does it feel lonely?" he asked, curious about her perspective. "No," she said, surprising him. "It feels like freedom." Those words stayed with Caleb as they completed the journey to the ranch. When the main house came into view, he watched Victoria's reaction carefully. She leaned forward slightly, taking in the sturdy structure, the barn and outbuildings, the corrals where horses moved in the morning sun. "It is larger than I expected," she admitted. "My father built it to last," Caleb said with pride. "He wanted something that could house generations." He helped Victoria down from the wagon, and as her feet touched the ground, the front door opened. His father emerged, followed by Matthew, whose expression was openly curious, and Rosa, who stood with her arms crossed, clearly reserving judgment. Charles stepped forward, removing his hat. "Miss Owens, welcome to the Circle N. I am Charles Norris. This is my younger son, Matthew, and our cook and housekeeper, Rosa." Victoria curtsied slightly, an oddly formal gesture that spoke to her Eastern upbringing. "Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Norris." "I am grateful for the opportunity." Charles nodded approvingly. "Caleb tells me you are a hard worker. We will see soon enough. Rosa will show you to your room and explain your duties. We keep early hours here. Breakfast is at dawn, dinner at midday, and supper when the work is done. Sundays we rest. Attend church if you are so inclined." "I understand," Victoria said, and Caleb could see her straightening her spine, preparing to prove herself. Rosa stepped forward and up close. Caleb could see the assessing look in her dark eyes as she studied Victoria. Rosa was 45, solid and practical, with graying black hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Come," she said simply. "I show you the house." As Victoria followed Rosa inside, Matthew sidled up to Caleb with a grin. "Well, brother, you certainly buried the lead when you said you were hiring help." "She is beautiful." "She is an employee," Caleb said firmly, though he could not help the defensive note in his voice. "And she is in a difficult situation. We are going to treat her with respect." "Of course," Matthew said, but his grin did not fade. "Respectful. Absolutely." Charles cleared his throat. "Both of you have work to do. Stop standing around gossiping like old women. Matthew, check the fence line on the north pasture. Caleb, those horses need breaking. Get to it." As Caleb walked toward the corral, he found his eyes drifting back to the house, wondering what Victoria was thinking as Rosa showed her around. He had brought her here, changed the course of her life with his impulsive offer. Now he could only hope that it would prove to be a change for the better, for both of them. Inside the house, Victoria followed Rosa through rooms that spoke of careful construction and years of living. The main room held a large fireplace, comfortable furniture worn smooth by use, and windows that let in generous light. The kitchen was spacious, dominated by a large cast iron stove and a sturdy wooden table. Everything was clean but had a neglected quality, as if it had been maintained but not truly cared for in some time. "Senora Norris, she died 3 years past," Rosa said, watching Victoria's face. "This house, it misses a woman's touch, you see." She gestured at the faded curtains, the dusty shelves, the general air of masculine disregard for details. "I see," Victoria said quietly. "I can help with that." Rosa led her up the narrow stairs to the second floor. 4 bedrooms up here. Center Charles, he sleeps in the master room there. Caleb and Matthew, they share the big room at the end. This one, she opened a door to reveal a modest but comfortable space. This is yours. The room held a single bed with a plain quilt, a small dresser, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a single window that looked out over the ranch yard toward the hills beyond. It was simple, but it was clean and private. Victoria set her carpetbag on the bed, feeling something tight in her chest loosen slightly. "I sleep downstairs in the room off the kitchen," Rosa continued. "You need something at night, you come find me. The door, it has a lock. You use it. Men in this house, they are good men, but still, a woman alone must be careful. Victoria turned to face Rosa directly. Thank you, she said sincerely, for your counsel and for your kindness. Rosa's stern expression softened slightly. You have no family, Caleb says, no one to watch over you. I watch over you now. We are not so different, you and I. Women alone, we must be strong and smart. Over the following days, Victoria settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She rose before dawn to help Rosa prepare breakfast for the men. They ate hearty meals, biscuits and bacon and eggs, strong coffee that could strip paint. The men ate with purpose, fueling themselves for hard physical labor, and conversation was minimal in the early morning hours. After breakfast, Victoria would tackle the seemingly endless list of household tasks. She washed clothes in the large tub behind the house, hanging them on lines to dry in the hot sun. She mended shirts and trousers worn thin by work and weather. She cleaned rooms that had gone too long without proper attention, scrubbing floors and dusting shelves and beating rugs until the dust made her cough. The work was harder than anything she had done in Missouri, where her duties at the dress shop had been genteel and relatively light. Here, her hands grew rough despite Rosa's offer of lard to soften them. Her arms ached from hauling water and wringing laundry, but there was also satisfaction in it, in seeing tangible results from her efforts, in watching the house slowly transform under her care. What surprised Victoria most was how much she enjoyed the work outdoors. Rosa had shown her the neglected kitchen garden, and Victoria had thrown herself into rescuing it. She weeded and watered, coaxing tomatoes and beans and herbs back to productive life. In the evenings, when the worst heat had passed, she would spend an hour in the garden, her hands in the soil, watching the sun paint the hills in shades of gold and purple. It was during one of these evening garden sessions, about a week after her arrival, that Caleb found her. Victoria was kneeling between rows of beans, carefully removing weeds when his shadow fell across her work. You have done wonders here, he said, gesturing at the neat rows and healthy plants. My mother would be pleased. Victoria sat back on her heels, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. Rosa told me your mother loved this garden. I hope I am honoring her memory by restoring it. Caleb crouched down beside her, his work-roughened hands hanging loosely between his knees. Up close, Victoria could smell the honest scent of him, horses and leather and clean sweat. His face was tanned from the sun, his eyes startlingly blue against the bronzed skin. She did love it, he said quietly. She said there was something holy about growing things, about working with the earth to create life. I did not fully understand what she meant until after she was gone. I am sorry you lost her, Victoria said softly. I remember what that feels like, that hollow space where a parent used to be. They were quiet for a moment, sharing the particular understanding that exists between people who have known significant loss. Then Caleb picked up a small hand trowel and began helping her weed, working in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower. How are you settling in? He asked after a while. Is everything acceptable? Rosa treating you well? Rosa has been wonderful, Victoria assured him. She is teaching me about the house, about California. She has a wealth of knowledge. And my father, Matthew, they are not making you uncomfortable, Victoria smiled. Your father is kind, if a bit distant. Matthew is young and enthusiastic. I find them both perfectly appropriate. Good, Caleb said, but he did not sound entirely satisfied. I want you to feel safe here, Victoria. If anything or anyone makes you uneasy, I want you to tell me immediately. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it made her breath catch. I do feel safe, she said, meeting his eyes. safer than I have felt in a very long time if I am being honest. Since my parents died, I have always felt like I was standing on unstable ground, never quite secure. But here, despite everything being new and strange, I feel steady. The look Caleb gave her in that moment made Victoria's heart race. There was something in his eyes, a warmth and intensity that went beyond employer and employee, beyond simple kindness. It was the look of a man seeing a woman he cared for, truly cared for, and Victoria found herself unable to look away. "I am glad," he said, his voice lower and rougher than usual. "I hope that bringing you here was the right thing to do, not just for practical reasons, but because I could not stand the thought of you struggling alone when I had the means to help." "Why?" Victoria asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. "You did not know me. I was a complete stranger. Why did you care what happened to me?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his gaze dropping to his hands. When he looked back up, there was vulnerability in his expression that made Victoria's chest tighten. "I wish I could explain it in a way that made sense. But when I saw you step off that stagecoach, something in me recognized something in you. It was like looking at a missing piece of myself. I know how that sounds, foolish and fanciful, but it is the truth." Victoria's heart was pounding now, her mouth dry. She should be cautious, she knew. She was dependent on this man and his family for her livelihood and shelter. Getting emotionally entangled was dangerous. But when she looked at Caleb, with his honest eyes and his gentle hands, she could not deny that she felt it too, that inexplicable connection. "It does not sound foolish," she said quietly. "Because I felt it too, I still feel it. But Caleb, I am your employee. I am living in your house because I had nowhere else to go. Whatever this is between us, we must be careful. I cannot risk my position here, my security." "I know," Caleb said, and she could hear the frustration in his voice. "I know we must be cautious. But Victoria, I need you to know that I care for you. More than I should, perhaps, given the circumstances. But I do, and I will not pretend otherwise." Before Victoria could respond, they heard the dinner bell ring from the house. Rosa's signal that the evening meal was ready. Caleb stood, offering Victoria his hand to help her up. When their hands clasped, that same jolt of connection ran through her, and she knew from the way his eyes widened slightly that he felt it too. They walked back to the house in charged silence, both aware that something significant had shifted between them. At the door, Caleb paused. "We will be careful," he said. "But I will not stop caring for you. I cannot." Over the following weeks, Victoria and Caleb navigated a delicate dance. In public, around Charles and Matthew and Rosa, they maintained careful propriety. Caleb treated Victoria with the same respectful courtesy he would show any employee. But in stolen moments, when they found themselves alone, the pretense would drop away. They would talk in the garden while Victoria worked, and Caleb helped with heavy tasks. They would meet by chance in the barn when Victoria went to collect eggs and Caleb was tending the horses. Conversations that started practical would drift into something deeper, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Victoria learned that Caleb had wanted to be a veterinarian once, fascinated by animal medicine, but there had been no opportunity for that kind of education. He learned that Victoria had loved to read, that she had dreamed of opening a bookshop, a dream that seemed impossible now but that she still held in her heart. "Why impossible?" Caleb asked one evening as they sat on the porch, shelling peas for Rosa. The others were still out with the cattle, giving them a rare moment of privacy. "Because it requires capital I do not have and likely never will," Victoria said practically. "Dreams are lovely, but they do not put food on the table or a roof over one's head." "What if you did not have to do it alone?" Caleb asked carefully. What if someone wanted to help you make that dream real? Victoria's hands stilled in their work. Caleb, you have already done so much for me. I could not ask for more. You are not asking. I am offering, he said, reaching over to cover her hand with his. Victoria, I know we have only known each other for a few weeks, but in that time, you have become essential to me. I wake up looking forward to seeing your face at breakfast. I find excuses to be wherever you are. I think about you constantly. This is not some passing fancy. I believe you are meant to be in my life. Caleb, Victoria breathed, her eyes filling with tears. I feel the same way, but what can we do? I am your employee. The town already talks about me living here. If we were to court openly, the gossip would be merciless. Then we do not court openly, Caleb said. Not yet. We give it time, let people get used to you being here. And when enough time has passed that no one can claim this is some hasty infatuation, then I will court you properly. With flowers and Sunday drives and intentions made clear to everyone. And if your father disapproves, if he thinks I am taking advantage of your kindness, my father is a practical man, but he is also a romantic at heart. He loved my mother desperately, and he wants his sons to find that same kind of love. When he sees that you make me happy, that we are good together, he will approve. I am certain of it. Victoria wanted to believe him. She wanted it so badly it hurt. But years of disappointment and loss had taught her to be cautious, to protect her heart. Let us take it slowly, she said finally. Let us see how the situation develops. If in 3 months, when my trial period ends, we still feel this way, then we can discuss the future. Caleb looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded. 3 months, he agreed. But Victoria, I can tell you now, I will feel exactly the same then as I do today. Some things you just know. As summer deepened into August and then September, Victoria found her place at the Circle Inn. The house responded to her care, becoming warm and welcoming again. The garden flourished under her attention, providing fresh vegetables for their table. She learned the rhythms of ranch life, the busy seasons and the quiet ones, the constant cycle of work that kept a place like this running. Rosa became more than just a co-worker. She became a friend and mentor, teaching Victoria not just about housekeeping, but about surviving and thriving as a woman in the West. Rosa had her own story of loss and resilience, having left her home and family to marry a man who worked the ranches, only to lose him to a fall from a horse just 3 years into their marriage. She understood what it meant to rebuild a life from broken pieces. That Caleb, Rosa said one morning as they kneaded bread together in the kitchen. He looks at you like you are water and he is dying of thirst. Victoria felt her cheeks heat. Rosa, we have been very proper. Proper, yes, Rosa agreed with a knowing smile, but proper does not mean blind. I see how you are together. It is good. You are good for him. He has been half alive since his mama died, just going through motions. But you have woken something in him. His father might not agree, Victoria said quietly, voicing one of her constant worries. Senator Charles, he wants his sons happy. He wants grandbabies to fill this house. He looks at you and he sees a woman of character and strength. He will not object, trust me. Victoria wanted to believe Rosa, but uncertainty still gnawed at her. She was an outsider, a woman with no family or connections, dependent on the Norris family's charity. What if they saw her feelings for Caleb as opportunistic? What if they thought she was trying to secure her position through romantic entanglement? The answer came unexpectedly one Sunday afternoon. Victoria had attended church with the family, sitting demurely beside Rosa while Caleb and Matthew sat with their father in the front pew. After the service, as people mingled outside, Victoria felt the weight of curious stares and whispered conversations. She knew she was the subject of much speculation, the mysterious woman from Missouri living at the Circle Inn, As they prepared to leave, Charles touched Victoria's elbow gently. "Miss Owens, might I have a word with you before we head back?" Victoria's heart sank. This was it, she thought. He was going to tell her that the arrangement was not working, that the gossip was too much, that she needed to leave. She followed him to a quiet spot beneath a large oak tree, steeling herself for disappointment. "I wanted to speak with you about my son," Charles began, and Victoria's stomach dropped further. But then he smiled, and it transformed his stern face into something warm and approachable. "Caleb thinks he is being subtle, but I have known that boy his whole life. He cares for you deeply. Does not take a genius to see it. Mr. Norris, I assure you, we have been entirely appropriate," Victoria started, but Charles held up a hand. "I am not accusing you of impropriety. What I am saying is that I see how you two are with each other, and it reminds me of how I was with Mary. That kind of connection is rare and precious. I would be a fool to stand in the way of it." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "You would not object if Caleb and I were to court?" "Object? My dear girl, I would be delighted. That house needs life in it again. It needs love and laughter and eventually, God willing, children. Caleb is a good man, one of the finest I know, but he has also been lonely for a long time. You have given him something to hope for again. That is a gift I cannot repay." "But the town," Victoria said. "People talk. They say I am a fortune hunter, that I am taking advantage of your family's kindness." Charles's expression hardened. "People will always talk, especially in a small town with little excitement. But those who matter, those whose opinions are worth considering, they see the truth. They see a young woman who has worked hard, who has brought grace and order back to our home, who has earned her place here through her own merit. The gossips can hang." The relief that flooded through Victoria was so intense it left her dizzy. "Thank you," she whispered. "You cannot know what it means to have your support." "I suspect I will be thanking you before long," Charles said with a gentle smile. "For making my son happy, for becoming part of this family. Now, let us head home before Rosa sends out a search party. You know how she gets when dinner is delayed." That evening, after supper was cleared and the dishes washed, Caleb found Victoria in her usual spot in the garden. The September air was cooler now, with the first hints of autumn, and Victoria had wrapped a shawl around her shoulders against the evening chill. "Your father spoke to me today," she said as Caleb settled beside her on the garden bench he had built the previous week. "I know," Caleb said. "He told me he was going to. I hope he did not overstep." "He gave us his blessing," Victoria said, turning to look at Caleb. In the fading light his face was shadowed, but she could see the hope in his eyes. "He said he would be delighted if we were to court." Caleb let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for weeks. "So we can stop hiding. We can be open about how we feel." "I think we should still be circumspect," Victoria said carefully. "But yes, we can acknowledge that we are courting. We can be seen together in town, attend church socials together. We can stop pretending that there is nothing between us." Caleb took her hand, lacing their fingers together. His palm was calloused from hard work, warm and strong. "Victoria Owens, would you do me the honor of allowing me to court you properly? With all the flowers and attention and public affection that entails," Victoria laughed, a sound of pure joy that bubbled up from some deep place within her. "Yes, Caleb Norris, I would be honored." He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. It was chaste and sweet, but it sent warmth flooding through Victoria's entire body. This was real, she thought. This man, this place, this new life. It was all real, and it was hers. The courtship of Caleb Norris and Victoria Owens became the favored topic of conversation in Paso Robles over the following months. Caleb was relentless in his attentions, bringing Victoria wildflowers from the hills, taking her on Sunday drives in the wagon, sitting with her at church socials and town gatherings. He made no secret of his affection, and Victoria, in turn, allowed herself to bask in it. She continued her work at the ranch, but now there was joy in it beyond simple satisfaction. She was not just maintaining a house, she was creating a home. Her home, potentially, if things continued on their current path. She learned to cook from Rosa, mastering the hearty ranch meals the men loved. She expanded the garden, adding flowers alongside the vegetables, bringing beauty as well as utility to the space. In October, the first real rain came, breaking the long dry season. Victoria stood on the porch, watching the water fall and transform the golden hills to green almost overnight. Caleb came to stand beside her, slipping an arm around her waist in a gesture that had become natural between them. "What are you thinking?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "That I never imagined my life would look like this," Victoria said honestly. "6 months ago, I was working in a dress shop in Missouri, barely scraping by, alone and without prospects. And now I am here with you, building something real. It feels like a miracle." "Not a miracle," Caleb said. "Just fate. You were meant to come here, I was meant to find you. Everything else just fell into place as it was supposed to." In November, Caleb took Victoria into town to attend the Harvest Dance, the biggest social event of the season. Victoria wore a dress that Rosa had helped her make from fabric Caleb had bought, a deep blue that brought out her eyes. She had pins in her hair and color in her cheeks, and when Caleb saw her come down the stairs, his breath caught audibly. "You are beautiful," he said simply. "The most beautiful woman I have ever seen." At the dance, held in the town hall decorated with autumn leaves and lanterns, Caleb claimed every dance with Victoria that propriety allowed. They spun and swayed to the music of fiddles and guitars, and Victoria felt like she was floating. Caleb held her like she was something precious, and when he looked at her, she saw her entire future in his eyes. It was during a break between dances, as they stood outside catching their breath in the cool night air, that Caleb took both her hands in his. "Victoria, we have been courting for 3 months now. By my count, that means your trial period at the ranch is over. You have more than proven yourself as an employee." He paused, his thumbs stroking over her knuckles. "But I do not want you to stay on as an employee. I want you to stay as my wife." Victoria's heart stopped. This was not entirely unexpected given the trajectory of their relationship, but hearing the words still left her breathless. "Caleb, are you asking me to marry you?" "I am," he said, dropping to one knee right there on the wooden sidewalk outside the town hall. Several people passing by stopped to watch, but Caleb seemed oblivious to the audience. "Victoria Owens, I love you. I have loved you since the moment you stepped off that stagecoach. You have brought joy back into my life, into our home. You have made me believe in destiny and fate and all those things I used to think were just stories. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner and the mother of my children? Will you build a life with me here in California on the Circle N?" Tears were streaming down Victoria's face, but she was smiling wider than she ever had in her life. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Caleb, I will marry you. I love you too. I think I have loved you from that first day, when you saw me at my lowest and offered me hope instead of pity." Caleb surged to his feet and pulled her into his arms, kissing her properly for the first time. It was not chaste or careful. It was deep and passionate and full of promise, and the small crowd that had gathered to watch broke into applause and cheers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "I do not have a ring yet," he admitted. "I wanted to ask you properly, but I could not wait any longer. I will get you a ring, something beautiful." "I do not need a ring," Victoria said, though her heart swelled at the thought. "I just need you." They were married in early December, in a simple ceremony at the church in Paso Robles. Victoria wore a dress that Rosa and several of the ranch wives had helped her sew white cotton with delicate embroidery. Caleb wore his Sunday best, his hair freshly cut and his face scrubbed clean. Matthew stood up as best man, and Rosa served as Victoria's matron of honor, beaming with pride and joy. Charles gave Victoria away, walking her down the short aisle with tears in his eyes. "Be happy," he whispered as he placed her hand in Caleb's. "Make each other happy." "We will," Victoria promised, and then she was turning to face Caleb, whose eyes were bright with unshed tears. The ceremony was short but meaningful. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb kissed her with such tenderness that Victoria felt her heart might burst. They were married. She was Victoria Norris now, no longer alone in the world but part of something larger, a family and a legacy. The reception was held at the Circle Inn, with neighbors and friends filling the house and spilling out into the yard despite the cool December air. There was food and music and dancing, and Victoria felt surrounded by warmth and goodwill. These people, who had been strangers just months ago, had become her community. This place, which had been foreign and intimidating, had become her home. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Caleb pulled Victoria aside. "I have something to show you," he said, taking her hand and leading her up the stairs. He brought her to the master bedroom, the one that had belonged to his parents. Victoria had cleaned it countless times but had never expected to occupy it. Now, she saw that it had been transformed. Fresh curtains hung at the windows. The bed had been made up with new linens, a wedding quilt that Rosa and the ranch wives had pieced together as a surprise gift. Candles had been lit, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. "My father moved his things to the smaller room," Caleb explained. "He said this room should belong to us now, that it was meant for a husband and wife. He wanted us to have it to start our marriage in a place of blessing." Victoria walked slowly into the room, taking in the thoughtfulness of the gesture. This had been where Caleb's parents had shared their life together, where they had loved and laughed and built their family. Now, it would be where she and Caleb would do the same. "It is perfect," she whispered, turning back to face her husband. The words still felt new and thrilling. Caleb closed the door softly behind them, and they were alone for the first time as man and wife. He crossed to her, taking her face gently in his hands. "I love you, Victoria Norris. I will spend every day of my life making sure you know how much." "I love you too," she replied, reaching up to cover his hands with hers. "Thank you for saving me, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for giving me a home and a future." "You saved me too," Caleb said softly. "You brought me back to life. Now let us start our new life together." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, a joining that felt both natural and miraculous. In the morning, Victoria woke wrapped in Caleb's arms, sunlight streaming through the windows, and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The first year of their marriage passed in a blur of happiness and adjustment. Victoria learned the full scope of being a ranch wife, which extended far beyond housekeeping. She kept the books, tracking expenses and income with the neat handwriting and arithmetic skills she had mentioned that first day. She helped with sick animals when needed, learning animal husbandry from Caleb. She preserved food for the winter, filling the cellar with jars of vegetables and fruits and pickles. But she also made the house a true home. She hung pictures on the walls, arranged furniture to create cozy spaces, planted flowers in window boxes. She hosted dinners for neighbors, establishing the Circle N as a center of hospitality. She befriended the other ranch wives, forming connections that enriched her life beyond what she had imagined possible. Matthew married in the spring of 1874, bringing his bride Anna to live on the ranch as well. Anna was a local girl, sweet and practical, and she and Victoria became fast friends. With 2 young women in the house now, the place felt alive in a way it had not since Mary Norris's death. Charles thrived with his family around him, frequently commenting that he felt like the luckiest man in California. He doted on Victoria, treating her like the daughter he had never had, and she returned his affection with genuine love and respect. In August of 1874, Victoria discovered she was expecting a child. The news filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had lost so much in her life, she feared losing this too. But Caleb was over the moon, treating her like she was made of spun glass, fussing over her constantly until Rosa finally told him to stop hovering. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," Rosa said with exasperation. "Victoria is strong. She will be fine." And Victoria was fine. Despite some morning sickness and fatigue, she sailed through her pregnancy with relative ease. She continued her work at the ranch, though Caleb and Charles insisted she take on lighter duties. She sewed tiny clothes and prepared the small room next to their bedroom as a nursery. She read books about childcare and pestered Rosa with questions about motherhood. In April of 1875, on a warm spring evening as the hills bloomed with wildflowers, Victoria went into labor. Rosa and the local midwife, Mrs. Patterson, attended her while Caleb paced the porch below with his father and brother. The labor was long and hard, and there were moments when Victoria feared she might not survive it. But at dawn, as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, Victoria gave birth to a healthy baby boy. When the midwife placed him in her arms, Victoria wept with relief and joy. He was perfect, with a thick shock of dark hair and eyes that would eventually turn the same blue as his father's. Caleb was called up from the porch, and when he saw his wife and son, he broke down completely. He sat on the edge of the bed, wrapping his arms around them both, crying openly with happiness. "He is perfect," he kept saying. "You are perfect. God, Victoria, I love you so much." They named him James Charles Norris after both his grandfathers. Charles Sr. was moved to tears when told, and even Matthew got misty-eyed holding his tiny nephew. The Circle N had a new generation, a promise of the future. Motherhood transformed Victoria in ways she had not anticipated. She had always been capable and strong, but now she discovered reserves of fierceness she had not known existed. She would do anything, fight anyone, sacrifice everything for her son. Watching Caleb with James was equally transformative. He was gentle and patient, singing lullabies his mother had sung to him, walking the floor with James at all hours when the baby was fussy. When James was 6 months old, Anna announced she was also expecting, and the household buzzed with excitement. The cousins would grow up together, playing in the same rooms and hills where their fathers had played. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch prospered under Charles's steady leadership and Caleb's hard work. They expanded their herd, bought additional land, became one of the most successful operations in the county. Victoria managed the household with quiet efficiency, creating an environment that was both productive and loving. In 1876, they celebrated the centennial of the nation with a huge party at the ranch, inviting everyone in the county. Victoria was pregnant again by then, moving more slowly but still insisting on overseeing preparations. This time, she was less afraid, more confident in her body's ability to bring life into the world. Their second child, a daughter, was born in October of 1876. They named her Mary Rose, after Caleb's mother and the wild roses that grew along the property's boundaries. She had Victoria's coloring, dark hair and those striking amber eyes. And from birth, she had a personality that filled every room she entered. James, now a toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would sit beside her cradle for hours, singing to her in his childish voice, bringing her toys and treasures he found around the ranch. Watching them together, Victoria felt her heart swell with gratitude for this life she had built from the ashes of her old one. Anna had her baby around the same time, a daughter named Elizabeth. The two little girls became inseparable as they grew, attached at the hip, filling the house with giggles and mischief. In 1878, when James was 3 and Mary Rose was 2, Victoria finally shared with Caleb the dream she thought she had given up. They were sitting on the porch after the children had been put to bed, enjoying the cool evening air. "Do you remember once early on when I told you about wanting to open a bookshop?" she asked. "I do," Caleb said, taking her hand. "Has that dream come back to you?" "It never really left," Victoria admitted. "I love my life here, please do not misunderstand. I love you and the children and the ranch. But sometimes I think about that dream, and I wonder if there might be a way to make it real, even in a small way." Caleb was quiet for a moment, and Victoria feared she had overstepped, been too greedy for wanting more than the already abundant blessings she had. But then Caleb squeezed her hand. "What if we built you a small shop in town? Nothing huge, just a single room. You could stock books, sell them to locals and travelers passing through. It would give you a project of your own, something beyond the ranch." "Caleb, we cannot afford that," Victoria protested, even as hope flared in her chest. "The ranch takes all our resources." "Actually, we have been doing quite well," Caleb said with a smile. "My father and I have been discussing diversifying, investing in ventures beyond just cattle. A bookshop is exactly the kind of solid, community-focused business that makes sense. It helps the town, it makes you happy, and it could even turn a modest profit." Over the next year, the plan took shape. They purchased a small building on the main street of Paso Robles, right next to the general store. Caleb and Matthew spent their spare time renovating it, building sturdy shelves and a front counter. Victoria ordered books from catalogs, carefully choosing titles she thought would appeal to the ranchers, farmers, and townspeople of the area. She mixed practical volumes, agricultural manuals and homesteading guides, with novels and poetry, educational texts and children's books. The bookshop opened in the spring of 1879, and Victoria called it the Reading Room. She worked there 3 days a week, with Rosa watching the children, while Anna and a hired girl handled the household duties in her absence. Those days in town, surrounded by books, helping customers find just the right title, felt like a different kind of fulfillment from her work at the ranch. It was intellectual and social, connecting her with the broader community in new ways. The shop was modestly successful, never making huge profits but bringing in enough to cover its costs and justify its existence. More importantly, it became a gathering place for women in the area, a spot where they could browse and chat and feel connected to the wider world beyond their isolated farms and ranches. Caleb would sometimes ride into town on Victoria's workdays, bringing the children to visit. He would help customers while Victoria nursed Mary Rose in the back room, or he would read to James while Victoria tallied accounts. Those moments, working side by side in a different context, reminded Victoria of how lucky she was to have a partner who supported all aspects of her life. In 1880, they had another child, another son they named Thomas William. With 3 children under 5, the household was chaotic and exhausting, but it was also filled with laughter and love. The children ran wild on the ranch, learning to ride almost before they could walk, helping with small chores, growing strong and confident under the California sun. Charles was in his 60s now, slowing down but still sharp and engaged. He adored his grandchildren, spending hours teaching James about the ranch, playing tea party with Mary Rose, rocking baby Thomas while humming old songs. Matthew and Anna added 2 more children to the family count, and the circle hummed with young life. In the evenings after the children were in bed, Caleb and Victoria would often sit on the porch, holding hands and watching the sun set over the hills. They would talk about their day, their plans, their dreams. Sometimes they would sit in comfortable silence, content just to be together. "Do you ever miss Missouri?" Caleb asked one evening. Victoria considered the question seriously. "I miss the idea of the people I lost. My parents, my aunt. I wish they could have known you, could have seen the life I built here, but miss the place itself. No, California is my home now. This ranch, this family, this is where I belong." "I am glad you walked into my life that day," Caleb said, pulling her close. "I thank God for it every single day." "I am glad you took my hand," Victoria replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "I was lost and you found me. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Caleb corrected. "We built this together." And it was true. What they had created was not just Caleb's gift to Victoria or Victoria's contribution to Caleb. It was a true partnership, a blending of 2 souls that had made both of them stronger and better. The years continued to roll by, marked by the rhythm of the seasons and the milestones of their growing family. James grew into a thoughtful, serious boy who loved books as much as ranching. Mary Rose was spirited and bold, always getting into scrapes, always leading her cousins on adventures. Thomas was sweet-natured and gentle, content to follow wherever his older siblings led. In 1882, Victoria had their 4th and final child, a daughter they named Clara Me. By then, Victoria was 31 and felt she had given enough of herself to childbearing. 4 children seemed like plenty, more than enough love and chaos to fill their lives. The bookshop continued to thrive in its modest way, becoming an established part of Paso Robles. Victoria eventually hired a young woman to manage it full-time, allowing her to step back to an advisory role. She still loved books and loved what the shop represented, but her primary focus was her family. Charles passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1885, at the age of 64. The loss hit the family hard, but it was tempered by the knowledge that he had lived a full life and died surrounded by the family and legacy he had built. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the land he had claimed and cultivated. With Charles gone, Caleb and Matthew jointly took over management of the Circle N. They ran it together harmoniously, their different strengths complementing each other. The ranch continued to prosper, and they were able to leave a healthy inheritance not just to their own children, but to establish a trust that supported the local school and church. As Victoria moved into her 40s and then 50s, she watched her children grow into capable adults. James took to ranching naturally, but he also had his mother's love of learning. He eventually went to college in San Francisco, studying agricultural science before returning to apply modern techniques to the Circle N. Mary Rose married a young doctor who set up practice in Paso Robles, giving Victoria the joy of having her daughter close by. Thomas became a teacher, fulfilling Victoria's early dreams of education in a way she never had. And Clara, the baby, proved to be a talented artist, painting landscapes of the California hills that captured their wild beauty. Grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with a new generation of noise and life. Victoria delighted in them, telling them stories of their grandfather Caleb as a young man, of how she had arrived in California with nothing and found everything. Caleb remained her rock, her partner, her great love. They grew old together, their hands becoming gnarled but still fitting perfectly together. They walked the ranch in the evenings, moving more slowly now but still finding beauty in the land and in each other. Their love had only deepened over the decades, weathering hardships and celebrating joys, becoming something solid and unshakable. On their 25th wedding anniversary in December of 1899, their children threw them a grand party. The house was filled with family and friends, multiple generations celebrating the love story that had started with a chance encounter on a dusty street. That evening, as the party wound down, Caleb took Victoria's hand and led her outside. It was a clear night, stars brilliant overhead, the air cool and clean. They stood together, looking out at the ranch that had been the stage for their life together. 25 years, Caleb said softly. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like we just got started. I would do it all again, Victoria said. Every moment exactly the same. Well, maybe with a little less morning sickness, she added with a laugh. Caleb chuckled, pulling her close. I saw destiny in your eyes that day, and I was not wrong. You were my destiny, Victoria. You are still my destiny every single day. And you were my salvation, Victoria replied. But more than that, you were my choice. Every day I chose you, and I always will. They stood there together under the stars, two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life of meaning and love. Behind them, the house glowed with warmth and light, filled with the family they had created. Before them, the land stretched out in darkness, the same land that had witnessed their story from its uncertain beginning to this moment of perfect contentment. As the new century dawned just weeks later, Victoria and Caleb faced it together, hands clasped, hearts united. They had lived the promise of the West, not in gold or glory, but in something far more precious. They had found home, they had found love, they had found each other. And that, Victoria thought as Caleb kissed her forehead tenderly, that was the greatest treasure of all. Their story was not one of grand adventures or dramatic trials. It was simpler than that, and perhaps more profound. It was the story of two people who recognized each other across a dusty street, who took a chance on love, who built a life together one day at a time. It was the story of how a woman with nothing and a man with everything found that together, they had exactly what they needed. The years ahead would bring more changes, more grandchildren, more seasons of planting and harvest. Victoria and Caleb would grow even older, their steps slower but their love unwavering. They would sit on that porch, hands clasped, watching the world turn, content in the knowledge that they had lived fully and loved completely. And when their time finally came, years later, they would leave behind a legacy not just of land and cattle but of love. The Circle N would continue, passed down through generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story. But it had all started with that moment on a July afternoon in 1873, when Victoria Owen stepped off a stagecoach and Caleb Norris knew his life would never be the same. She had walked into his life unannounced, a stranger with amber eyes and a carpetbag full of hopes. He had seen destiny in those eyes and had taken her hand, literally and figuratively, offering her safety and eventually his heart. And together, they had created something beautiful, something lasting, something that would echo through the generations long after they were gone. That was their story, that was their legacy, That was their love.